I pledge to the United States. Read your neighbor. Hey. Today's reflection will be offered by Lord.
This first November invocation is adapted from one given by Michael Baker of the Rotary Club of White Plains, New York. I have many things to be thankful for, and one of them is being a Rotarian. I am thankful for our Rotary leaders who unselfishly give of themselves to guide us in our goals. I am thankful for the friendships that are made as we work together. I am thankful for being among Rotarians that have different faiths, goals, and genders, and who are all working toward the same goals. I am thankful for our programs that inspire us with wonderful people who are dedicated to their great works. I am thankful for being a Rotarian who is reminded that in our busy and sometimes self-consumed lives, that service above self is a wonderful motto to live by. And finally, we are all thankful for the time and energy given to this wonderful lunch today by our dedicated kitchen staff. Amen.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome, Rotarians. Welcome, guests. Today's Rotary member highlight. This Rotarian is the president and CEO of Westview Healthy Living. She has been with the Worcester Rotary since 2020 and is active, being our first impression to new members to the club, serving on the welcoming committee. This active Rotarian lives in Creston with her husband, John, has a daughter, Megan, married to Chandler. She has two grandsons, Bryce and Ryan, and one granddaughter, Lennon. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in gerontology, the study of aging, and has worked in the long-term care field for 36 years. Today's Rotary member highlight is Bonnie Ferguson Hall. One more reminder about the September quarterly billing statements. If you have not gotten that by email, come and see me. A couple of things that we have going on here today. The Al Van Weed tournament is coming. We just had a youth skills this past weekend. Mike Stinson will come up and talk about that a little bit in just a while. Community flag program, we still need help there. Lee King, who is also here today, will be sending out a sign up via email. So sign up, sign off, and for that. Salvation Army Bell Ring is coming up. You'll be hearing more about that. Yeah, a few other things that are coming up as you can see on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike Steenson, and we'll hear a little bit more about the Al Van Weed basketball clinic. Mike.
Morning or afternoon. Our first guest today is Doug Klein. Doug is the head coach of the College of Worcester basketball team. Doug played and graduated from the College of Worcester in 1995. He's been on staff with the basketball program for 29 years and has been the head coach since 2020. During his tenure with the program, he has helped the team to over 600 victories, numerous NCAA appearances, and several trips to the Division III Final Four. Doug and his captains here today are to talk about the upcoming season and the Alabama League tournament. I'd like to thank Doug and the whole College of Worcester team for running the Rotary Clinic, or Rotary sponsored clinic yesterday. And I'd like to say thank you to the College of Worcester Athletic Department for reinstating the policy of free admission with a donation to the People to People food drive. So let's have a warm Rotary welcome to Doug Klein and the captains of the College of Worcester basketball team.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to be here again today, and it's hard to believe that it's early November and basketball season is just about to start. But I want to introduce a few guys that came with me today. First of all, Jack Stevens, who's our full-time assistant coach, and he's a graduate of the college and does an outstanding job. Stand up, Jack. Then we have 3 players that came, and 3 of them are, we have 4 seniors this year. Each one of them's a captain on our team. Key guys for our program have been. One of them couldn't make it because he's had a class, but Nick Everett, who's from Salem, Ohio, West Branch High School. Jameer Billings, senior from Lorraine High School. And my son JJ, who went to Northwestern. So, but like I said, it's a pleasure. Can't thank the Worcester Rotary enough for being a part of this tournament. I can't believe that this tournament's been going on. The first Alabama League Rotary tournament was my senior year in college. Man, I can't believe that was 1994, 95. I hate to even admit that. And if you talk about that to our players, and I never mentioned that I played in the first one because I don't think they'd believe it. You know what I mean? They already think you're old anyways if you're past 40 to 50 years old. So, but I did play in the first one. It is an honor too to have a tournament in Coach Van Wee's name. I built a great relationship once he retired from the college as athletic director and basketball coach, and had a lot of days where we just sat around and talked basketball, talked life. And I know he was tremendous for the Worcester community to be able to have a tournament named after him, and then have the biggest canned food drive for our community, which is very important to me since I grew up around here, and Worcester's my hometown, and Wayne County's my home community. It's very important for that, and this has been excellent with People to People Ministries. The clinic went good yesterday. Obviously we had to have it a couple weeks earlier this year than maybe we'd like to, because in Division III now you can start playing basketball a heck of a lot earlier than you could several years ago. So we actually play our first game this weekend on Sunday, and that's another. We play the next 2 Sundays, so that's another reason why we couldn't have the skills clinic either next week or the week after. It just worked out that way. There's a team, Yeshiva College is coming from New York City. They wanted to play us in Mount Union, so they're playing Mount Union on Friday. And then they can't, they're playing us on Sunday afternoon at 1. And then the following weekend, we're playing at Otterbein. And for some reason, Sunday's the only day that works for them. So that's why we're playing them on a Sunday. So unfortunately, we couldn't have the skills clinic as close to the Alabama weekend, tournament weekend as in years past. But it still was a good day. And it's good for our guys to be a part of the community. And it's awesome for the kids. I think the kids really enjoy it because they get to be around our players, which is like when kids come to our camps in the summertime. To me, that's the most important thing those kids get, and they love the most. Yeah, they get some good teaching, good coaching. At the end of the day, they want to be around our players and build those relationships and get to know them. And that's important for our players to learn how to interact with the younger kids and make them feel good about the situation. So I think that's a big part of yesterday. And then obviously we're able to raise some canned foods for that. But so we're really excited about the Alabama. It should be a really good tournament. We're actually playing LaRoche. We have LaRoche College out of Pittsburgh, who was in the NCAA tournament last year. We have Bluffton College coming in, and then we have Mount Union, the University of Mount Union, but we're playing LaRoche, probably the better team of them in Bluffton. The first night, I don't know, Mount Union, for some reason, Mount Union was in the national championship game 2 years ago, but they didn't want to play as tough a game as like LaRoche, and then have to obviously play us maybe the next night. But so we're playing LaRoche first, and Mount Union's playing Bluffton. And then the two winners meet and the two losers meet on Saturday. So it should be an excellent tournament. There's good teams. Like I said, two of the teams, Mount Union didn't make the tournament last year, but they should have. They were defending national runner-ups the year before. Had a really good team, And then LaRoche did make the tournament, so it should be a exciting weekend of basketball, and hopefully we'll be able to raise more canned food for the drive. And it is nice that Lynn Holler, our athletic director, did commit to going back to the days where if you bring canned foods, you get in free, which hopefully that'll help our crowds and also help people to people ministries as well. But yeah, our team this year, we're excited about it. Our guys have been working hard. They've done a good job. We're forcing, I think you've heard me speak in the past, COVID's hurt us a little bit because we don't have grad school. And if you don't have grad school during COVID right now, all these schools are playing with 24-year-old guys, and we're not. And Worcester, you can't even get a guy to come in for 1 year. You have to go to Worcester for 2 years to graduate. So a lot of these schools are really reaping the benefits. Now this is the last COVID year, but it's hurt, no doubt about it, because we're playing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds mostly during this time period. While everybody else is playing. We played a really tough schedule last year. A lot of close games that we could have won. It could have went down either way in our non-league. But most of those teams had 2 to 3 to 4 24-year-old players, 6-year guys. And that's just a big difference in college basketball. As you watch Division I's and stuff, which actually start today. I mean, I know the one Miami football player, this is his 9th year. You know, but there's basketball players, it's their 7th year, 8th year. I mean, it's unbelievable. But this is the last COVID year, and we've done good. We've survived COVID. We won the league once, lost the championship game twice. But we're excited about this year's team because we do have older players, not the grad players or anything like that. But we have 4 seniors, Nick and JJ, in their 5th year. They're using their COVID year this year. Jameer is a 4th-year senior. Ashton Price, who's not here, a senior from Bay Village. He's a 4th-year senior. And then we have 4 juniors that played for us last year. So we have our top 8 guys returning, which is exciting. We got to obviously keep working to get better. And then we have some good young guys, some newcomers that could help us out a little bit. A good freshman class with good numbers. We have a few sophomores. So there's good balance between the classes. So we're excited about that. But we played another tough non-league schedule. And it started off last week. We had the opportunity with Lamont Paris, who some of you might know and remember. He played for us. And he's the head coach of the University of South Carolina now. And fortunately, it didn't look like it was going to happen. I tried to get him when he came up to the graduations. He was the speaker for graduation last May. I tried to get him to play us in an exhibition game, but Division I changed the rules, and Division I's can now exhibition Division I's, which that hurts our opportunities as smaller colleges to play those type of schools, which is a really good thing. But in September, Wake Forest backed out, and so he called me, and it was a month before, but heck, we're going to take advantage of that opportunity anytime we can. And he invited us down, and so last Wednesday we actually played at the University of South Carolina in an exhibition game against them, which was a really good game for us. They were in the NCAA tournament last year. Lamont was SEC Coach of the Year. They won like 26 games, and it was just a great opportunity. They got some different players this year, but they're more athletic than even were last year. Going into the game, my main concern was I wanted to see if our guys would actually compete and not back down and rebound against them, play defense, and be tough with the ball and not turn it over. And for the most part, we did that. They had more turnovers than us. We actually had 13 steals in the game. Big part of the first half late, we were leading until they went on a little run. But like I told the guys, in years past when we played these Division I's, a 7-8-0 run where they go on usually turns into a 20-0 run or 24-0 run. I told them that at the timeout, and we came back out and cut it right back down to 2 or 3. And then they went on a little run. We were down 12 at halftime, and then with about 14, 15 minutes left, we were only down 2. So our guys competed. Our guys definitely competed. They're strong. Their starting lineup is 6'2", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'10". They're athletic, and our guys battle with them. Yeah, we got beat on the boards a little bit, but that's sort of to be expected with that athleticism, that strength. But it was a great experience for our guys. It was an awesome trip, and then we scrimmaged. We had to come right home on Thursday, and we scrimmaged Marietta on Friday, and there were some good things in there. We rested some of our guys for a part of it, just because the week was so taxing with the travel and things like that. But it was a really, really good week for us, and now we have 1 week left to get ready for the season, so we're excited about that. Anybody have any questions at all I can answer about our program? But thank you so much.
Thank you, Coach Klein. Worcester Rotary Club certainly appreciates and considers it an honor to be able to host the Alvan Week tournament, and thank you for helping us organize the Canned Good Drive as well. So at this point, I will turn this over to Secretary Lynn.
Thank you, President Tom. We will start with the elections today. And I would like to thank the nominating committee for their time and thoughtful consideration in proposing the slate of club leaders on your tables. At first, I was disappointed that Marty Starkey and Bonnie Ferguson Hall couldn't be here because they're on vacation. But once you look at the slate, Bonnie's here. Thank you, Bonnie. Glad you're here. That it's most important you're here. I'm glad Marty's not here because I misspelled her name. So, oh, sorry, Marty. I was gonna try to destroy all the evidence before the end of the meeting, but here we go. On behalf of the committee, it is my privilege to nominate Marty Starkey to be our next vice president. Any member who has consented and has served at least 1 year on the board can also be nominated from the floor. Nominations from the floor are open. Past President Bill.
Madam Secretary, I move that the nominations be closed and that the club casts a unanimous ballot for Marty Stark. Second.
Motion is being made and there's a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed, thank you and congratulations, Vice President Marty Starkey. The committee is also pleased to nominate Dr. Nick Pasquarelli, Melanie Garcia, and Bonnie Ferguson Hall as new board members. Any member who has been a Rotarian for at least 2 years can be nominated from the floor. Nominations from the floor are open.
Madam Secretary, I move to cast a unanimous ballot for the candidates as listed on the ballot and close the election.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Congratulations, Nick, Melanie, and Bonnie. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our guests now. We'll start from the podium. Dr. Schiff.
Yes, Apple Hopkins is the wife of our speaker.
Matt Martin has the traveling microphone. We'll start with Jeff Derlin.
Tammy Gunn, she leads our organizational financial wellness program for PNC, so it covers 8 counties and all our corporate clients.
Jim Webster.
Please welcome Charlie Green, founder of 3i Solutions.
Our guests, and I think we have some real short updates from Hannah and Viteri.
Good afternoon, everyone. Supposed to be very big. I just wrote a few things down. So, my brother's birthday was on Monday, in 18. I need flyers for the play for the musical, but I did not bring them. Hopefully, I can give them to you. I had a floor retreat this weekend, last weekend. And I went to Parisville, if you know where that is. Doesn't know where that is. I had very fun, activities that we did, and, I went there with my third host family's daughter. It was very fun. Then, we also went to Mean Girls, Cleveland. Yeah, it was very fun. I had a lot of fun. I got a souvenir, a shirt. I never forgot this shirt from the fall retreat. Went to the back too. I'm sorry I don't have time to show you this because we're in a hurry. I don't know my second host family, but I know my third. So probably I'll just live somewhere in the middle.
I will buy you secretary and the chief information. And okay, so I'm in Duolingo. I have to take a certification test of English, and I do it so hard. Like I don't know how to speak English. I've been doing practice. Like, I've been practice Cambridge, but Duolingo is only very bad. Yeah, that's my life basically. I did Duolingo. I've been working. I've been doing college applications, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you both, President Tom.
Thank you, Lynn. At this time, I will turn it over to Doug Ducey.
Thank you, President Tom. Battle of Gettysburg was one of the seminal events of American history. Fought on July 1st to 3rd, 1863 in rural Pennsylvania. The battle is considered the turning point of the Civil War. The North's victory at Gettysburg ending the South's hope of separate nation. There were some 50,000 casualties, including some 7,000 deaths. Needless to say, it was a memorable experience for those who survived, and that's our topic for today. John L. Hopkins is a communication and public relations professional with more than 3 decades of experience in higher education, nonprofit, and agency settings. Born and raised in New York City, he earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Williams College and was transplanted with his family to the Midwest 30 years ago, first to Milwaukee, then to Worcester, where he served as Associate Vice President for College Relations and Marketing at the College of Worcester for 17 years. After retiring from the college a couple of years ago, John turned his attention to his interest in the Civil War and decided to write a book, which resulted in a book entitled The World Will Never See the Light, the Gettysburg Reunion of 1913. In a world where most such projects get no further than a notebook in the author's home office or perhaps self-publishing through Amazon, John's book caught the attention of a publisher which saw the merit of the story. And as an aside, the book's available through that publisher if anybody is interested. In what can only be called a dream come true for a new author, the book received a glowing review in the Wall Street Journal, which called it a compelling, poignant, and sometimes heartbreaking account of the biggest gathering of the blue and gray since the Civil War. Please join me in welcoming John Hopkins.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation to join you today. I started this morning, as I try to most days, walking up at Oak Hill Park, so I would be remiss if I missed this opportunity to say thank you to Rotary for the role that you have played in helping to bring that wonderful resource to the community. On an early spring day in 1908, Henry Shippen Heidekoper, a veteran of the 150th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry who had lost his right arm at Gettysburg, met with Pennsylvania Governor Edwin Stewart at the Union League in Philadelphia. He said he'd given much thought to the fact that in July 1913, it would be 50 years since the Battle of Gettysburg, and he urged that the anniversary be properly celebrated. Governor Stewart agreed, and the following year, the Pennsylvania legislature authorized the creation of the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg Commission. More than 2.75 million men served in the armed forces of the Union and the Confederacy during the Civil War. 2 million of them survived to return home. And in the decades that followed, they played an outsized role in the life of the nation. 5 of the 7 US presidents between 1869 and 1901 were Union combat veterans. In 1892, fully half the members of the US Senate and 4 in 10 members of the House of Representatives were either Union or Confederate veterans. And in that year, pensions for Union veterans accounted for fully 43% of the federal budget. But as the 20th century began, the veterans' ranks were thinning and their influence was beginning to wane. Membership in the Grand Army of the Republic, the largest of the Union veterans organizations, had fallen by almost a third from its peak. And in 1903, the year of the Wright brothers' first flight, the Philadelphia Public Ledger declared that the days of the Civil War seemed infinitely remote, as though they must have belonged to some elementary period of civilization with which we no longer have anything in common. The old soldiers themselves were keenly aware of the passage of time. The 50th anniversary of those 3 bloody days in July 1863 would be an opportunity to remind their fellow citizens that the unity and prosperity that the nation now enjoyed had its roots in the hallowed grounds of 100 Civil War battlefields, of which none loomed larger in memory than Gettysburg. Now, the planners decided that the reunion camp would open on Sunday, June 29th, 1913, and close on the following Sunday, in the hopes of staggering the arrival and departure times of the tens of thousands of veterans expected to attend. By the first week in April 1913, 200 laborers were hard at work, laying water mains from newly dug wells, framing up scores of temporary structures from camp kitchens to field hospitals, and building the hundreds of long wooden tables and benches at which the veterans would eat. They finished erecting the last tent just hours before the old men began to arrive. The camp covered 280 acres on the battlefield, from Confederate Avenue on the west, which is at the upper part of this schematic here, to the Emmitsburg Road on the east, and from South Street at the edge of town to a point just north of the high water mark monument. More than 6,500 tents were laid out along 47 miles of company streets, illuminated by 500 electric lights. There were 173 field kitchens, 2 full field hospitals, 11 aid stations, a temporary post office, and a 13,000-seat tent where the main events, along with dozens of state and individual unit reunions, were to take place. And in a rail car on one of the new sidings in town were 100 coffins, because the Army doctors anticipated that the veterans' advanced age, most of these men were in their 70s, some in their 80s, combined with the heat and the long distances that many would travel, to say nothing of living in tents for a week in the July heat, that all those together would exact a steep toll on the old men. Overseeing the encampment was Brigadier General Hunter Liggett of the U.S. Army. The 1,465 officers and men under his commands included a young Lieutenant Simon Bolivar Buckner, son of a Confederate general of the same name, who served as liaison to the scores of newspaper reporters and photographers who were accredited to cover the event. And the cavalry detachment assigned to patrol the battlefield park's roads included another young lieutenant named George S. Patton, Jr., whose great uncle had been mortally wounded in Pickett's charge. Now, as you can imagine, the logistics of transporting more than 53,000 veterans to Gettysburg, about 45,000 Union men and 8,000 former Confederates, well, those logistics were daunting. Special trains departed from Detroit and Minneapolis, Richmond and Charlottesville, Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Maine. And by nightfall, on Sunday, June 29th, 21,000 veterans were in camp. And around 2 a.m., they were awakened by a pair of loud explosions, and the air was split by the unmistakable rebel yell out near Seminary Ridge, where most of the old Confederates were quartered. It seems that some of the livelier ones had swabbed out two of the old cannons that marked the position of Edward Porter Alexander's batteries, charged them with some black powder, and then touched them off. Clearly, it was going to be quite a week. Now, between midnight Sunday and midnight Monday, 53 trains deposited another 22,000 veterans in camp. And the strain of funneling that much traffic down to Gettysburg's two rail lines was beginning to show. The South Carolina special was 6 hours late. New Jersey veterans reached camp long after midnight to find their tents occupied by others, so they bedded down in the Ohio section, much to the dismay of the Buckeyes, who finally rolled in around 6:30 a.m. But it all got sorted out, and the veterans were able to turn their attention to more important matters, which a reporter for the New York Times described as the hunting up of the man who shot you, if you could find him, and if you couldn't, then hunting up of the man whose regiment fought yours. There was an amazing number of such reunions, he wrote. John Morris, for example, a veteran of the 1st Ohio Light Artillery. On July 2nd, 1863, the 19-year-old and his battery mates had fought their guns near the base of Little Round Top on either side of the Wheatfield Road. When they returned in 1913, they met a Georgia veteran who had charged their position repeatedly. I told him I was glad to meet him, Morris said, and that I thought they did some pretty good charging. To which the Georgian replied, yes, and we all thought you did some pretty good shooting, and we tried to give you your money's worth. Another Georgian, Harry Simmons, who had been wounded in fierce fighting around the 4th New York Battery near Devil's Den on July 2nd, was reunited with Hugh Martin, a member of one of those Union gun crews, who had helped carry him from the field after he was hit. We simply could not be separated at the reunion, Simmons told a reporter, and were together much of the time at Gettysburg. Some, like 82-year-old Confederate Colonel Thomas Taylor Munford and 76-year-old Captain George N. Bliss of the 1st Rhode Island Cavalry, arranged in advance to meet at the reunion and ended up talking for hours together. But many more met serendipitously. A Virginian who had lived in Missouri since the close of the war found a tent full of his old comrades from the 11th Virginia. It's sure a treat for sore eyes, he told them. I never expected to see you boys again. A Union veteran from Harrisburg was reunited with 3 fellow members of the 81st Pennsylvania, whom he had not seen since the Grand Review in Washington in May of 1865. E.V. Kaufman of the 10th Virginia was able to return a Bible to the friends of a man killed at Spotsylvania Courthouse. Now, back when the reunion was being planned, there had been considerable discussion of whether the Confederate veterans would be permitted to wear their United Confederate veteran uniforms, like the gentleman on the left in this photo, and also permitted to carry their old battle flags. Former Confederate General Felix H. Robertson of Texas thought that if Union veterans were permitted to wear their GAR uniforms, the same courtesy should be extended to those who wore the gray. But others disagreed, including Elijah Rhodes, who thought that all should go to the encampment solely as American citizens. Robertson was equally adamant on the question of the battle flags. At the Pennsylvania Commission's 3rd General Conference in January 1913, he had declared, I want to wave in your faces again the very Texas Brigade battle flag that we shook in your faces on July 3rd, 1863. If you were able to drive it back then, its faded colors can do you no harm now. Pennsylvania Governor John Tenner settled the matter by declaring that the old rebels were coming as guests of the state of Pennsylvania, and it made no difference to him whether they came in civilian attire or their UCB uniforms, or whether they carried those battle flags. And so when the reunion opened, on the Confederate side of camp, the old flags were displayed with pride, though not entirely without controversy. According to Vermont veteran Frank Kenfield, many of the boys took exception to the Confederate flag and considered it an insult to that emblem of liberty for which they fought 4 long years to sustain. Now, for the average American in 1913, Gettysburg was all about Pickett's charge. And even though nearly as many North Carolina regiments had taken part in the third day's assault on the Union Center as those from Virginia, 15 and 18 respectively, along with a dozen more from Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida, Pickett's charge was all about Pickett's Virginians. Fewer than 100 survivors of Pickett's division attended the reunion, but they were, according to a Union veteran, the Confederates most sought after in the camp, readily identifiable by their white silk badges, 6 inches long by 2.5 wide, which bore the words Pickett's Men, 1863-1913, Sic Semper Tyrannis, July 3rd, Gettysburg. The reunion's organizers had designated 2 p.m. on July 3rd as the moment when Pickett's charge would be reenacted. Now, in deference to the veterans' age and the blistering heat, temperatures hovered in the 90s that whole week and broke 100 more than once. The Virginians formed up on the Emmitsburg Road rather than cover the whole nearly mile-long distance over which they had advanced 50 years earlier. Waiting for them on Cemetery Ridge were almost 200 veterans of the Philadelphia Brigade, each of whom had 2 small souvenir badges, courtesy of Wanamaker's department store in Philadelphia, one to keep and one to pin on an old adversary. Now, this is the iconic photo from the 1913 reunion that you may have seen, may recall it from Ken Burns' epic series on the Civil War. But the actual scene that day was a little bit different. As a band from Richmond played Dixie, the old men stepped off behind a shot-riddled Confederate battle flag through fields of knee-high wheat and timothy grass. Some walked with the aid of canes, others shaded themselves with umbrellas. And when they neared the wall, they had to elbow their way through a dense crowd of spectators and reporters, and then listen patiently, maybe not so patiently, to Congressman J. Hampton Moore of Philadelphia, who the New York Tribune noted spoke at some length while the merciless sun fairly roasted his audience. Some things just never change. Now, finally, the speech is over. The 2 lines surged forward to shake hands across the wall, but the crowds made it impossible to frame the money shot that the photographers so desperately wanted. So this one, the one we're all familiar with, had to be staged. That day, July 3rd, was capped off with a fireworks display that reportedly cost the Pennsylvania Commission $10,000. Some serious money in 1913. When it was over, the veterans settled down outside their tents. Yanks and Rebs mingled together everywhere. The air had finally cooled down, and according to the Detroit Free Press's man in camp, no one wanted to go to bed. The following morning, July 4th, at 5 a.m., a U.S. Army band struck up an Independence Day medley of America, Yankee Doodle, Marching Through Georgia, and Dixie as they marched through the streets of the camp, rousing the veterans who responded with cheers. For the men of the Irish Brigade, the day began on a more solemn note at St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in town, where a Requiem High Mass was celebrated for the repose of the souls of their deceased comrades. Around 11 a.m., President Woodrow Wilson arrived by special train at the Western Maryland station and was whisked by automobile to the great tent, where, after a brief photo op with a couple of veterans, he mounted the stage and began to speak. But not about the battle, or the reunion, or really even about the veterans themselves. I need not tell you, Wilson said, how the battle went, how it ended, what it signified. Instead, he pressed upon his audience and the scores of reporters in attendance his vision of present-day America and the progress it could achieve if only it united behind a strong, wise, energetic leader. A leader like, well, Woodrow Wilson. According to the New York Times, Wilson was interrupted only once or twice with cheering that seemed perfunctory. Then he headed back to his private rail car after spending precisely 46 minutes in Gettysburg. At noon, as the president's train rolled out of town, a bugle rang out and a 48-gun salute began to boom. The veterans stopped what they were doing, uncovered their heads, and for 5 minutes, the whole camp fell silent in a final tribute to the dead. Many wept. After lunch, many began preparing to leave. By evening, the Army officers estimated that some 10 to 15,000 veterans remained in camp. Sunday morning, the exodus continued. H. Hodges went out to the angle just after daybreak and filled a suitcase with soil that he planned to spread in his front yard back home in Union Hill, North Carolina. But as he waited at the Western Maryland Railroad station in the 90-degree heat, Hodges suddenly clutched his chest and fell dead. The 9th and final veteran to die at the reunion. A toll, however, far smaller than the organizers had feared. Western Maryland officials promised to send the soil south with his remains so that it could be placed in his grave. For the men on both sides, the reunion had been an event unlike anything they had ever experienced, and its impact was profound. There never has been, nor there never will be, any such gathering of men again, wrote North Carolina veteran A.H. Boyden to his new friend, Robert Drummond, in New York. It has cemented and absolutely blotted out whatever little hatred might have remained in the hearts of the men who wore the gray. A Union veteran wrote to an old Confederate, "It has permanently altered my point of view and forever changed my thinking. I tell all my friends that you men are first-class Americans." Newspapers across the country deemed the reunion an unqualified success. As a moral spectacle, declared the Christian Science Monitor, the analog of the event cannot be cited from ancient, medieval, or modern history. Now, the secret to that success, said a former commander of the United Confederate Veterans, was really simple. Everyone simply ignored the differences which led to the war. Indeed, speaker after speaker at the reunion from both North and South had offered up central elements of the lost cause myth. That each side had simply fought for the right as they understood it, sort of a dispute over constitutional interpretation. You know. That the South had taken arms to defend states' rights, not slavery. Emancipation was referred to obliquely, if at all, as an outcome of the war. The emphasis was overwhelmingly on the restoration of the Union. And the war was framed as a titanic clash of men of common Anglo-Saxon heritage and blood. Now, nowhere in this lovingly constructed Civil War memory was there a place for the more than 180,000 African Americans who also had fought to restore the Union and to liberate nearly 4 million of their enslaved brethren. You would never know it from the contemporary press coverage or the 270-page report of the Pennsylvania Commission, but there were indeed veterans of the United States colored troops at the 1913 reunion. 50 came from Thomas Hamilton Post of the GAR in Trenton, New Jersey, a dozen from David R. Stevens Post in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and still others from New York City's Thaddeus Stevens Post. In my research for this book, I was able to identify 16 of these veterans by name, including Henry Charles of the 55th Massachusetts, Alfred Williams of the 29th Connecticut, and Cassius Mars of the 41st U.S. Colored Infantry. Black veterans appear in just 2 of the hundreds of photos preserved in the state archives of Pennsylvania, and you have to look pretty carefully to even see them. Here, for instance, is a crowd of Pennsylvania veterans arriving in their section of the camp. On the far left of the frame, an African-American veteran looks toward the camera. On the right, another, wearing a bowler hat, stands with his back to the photographer. It's a little bit easier to see them here when you zoom in a bit. Now here's another wide shot of veterans around the Pennsylvania Memorial. including these two gentlemen sitting on the steps. Needless to say, all of these USCT veterans are absent from the photos that ran in the newspapers. I'd like to close with these two men who, for me, exemplified the spirit of the 1913 reunion. On the left is Union veteran Frank H. Cobb of the 1st Regiment of Berdan's Sharpshooters. On the right, William H. Sanders of the 11th Alabama. They met for the first time while on picket duty along the Rappahannock River in 1863, where, like so many others, they swapped tobacco for sugar and coffee. A year later, when Cobb was seriously wounded and captured in the wilderness, their paths crossed again, as Sanders, the 11th Alabama's regimental surgeon, saw to the Yanks' treatment. After the war, Sanders set up a medical practice in Mobile. Cobb went home to Hudson, Michigan, where he worked as a railroad clerk. They corresponded for a time after the war, but eventually fell out of touch. But then in March 1913, Sanders wrote to the postmaster in Hudson, seeking to find out if Cobb was still alive. He was, and they resumed their correspondence and made plans to meet at the reunion, where they spent 2 days together walking the battlefield. When the reunion in Gettysburg was over, Sanders traveled back to Hudson as Cobb's highly honored guest, according to the local paper, and 200 townspeople turned out for a reception in his honor. The veterans were sure that this gathering of 53,000 old comrades and former foes would be remembered for as long as the Battle of Gettysburg itself. But it was not to be. As the old soldiers faded away, so too did the public's memory of the 1913 reunion. I hope you'll agree that it deserves to be reclaimed from history's footnotes. There's a great deal more to the story, obviously, than I can cover in 20 minutes, but I hope I've piqued your interest. If I have, conveniently, there's a book about the event. The world will never see the like. Available in both hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats from Savis Beatty, my publisher. So thank you again for this chance to speak to you. I'd be happy to take any questions. That's what I got. Here, oh, I'm sorry. Hey, how you doing?
John, that was fascinating.
Thanks.
I'm curious, how you went about doing research. I really haven't ever seen
Yeah.
much about it and how, where you had to go, how long it took you, that kind of.
Yeah, what started me down this rabbit hole was a book I read maybe 15 years ago, a wonderful book called Pickett's Charge in History and Memory by Carol Reardon. And it's about how the conflicting memories of the battle were sort of argued over for decades afterward by the veterans themselves. And in there's like 6-8 pages about the 1913 reunion. And at the time when I read it, I was fascinated. And I thought, let me go find the book that someone has surely written about this. And no one had. So that got me going. This was like a nights and weekends project. There's a lot. I made several trips to to Gettysburg itself, in the library, at the Battlefield Park. There's a number of records, including some first-person accounts by veterans who were there. A lot of material in the state archives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, since they were the organizers. So the meeting minutes and correspondence and all sorts of stuff there, and hundreds of photographs from where most of these came from. Some of them are from the Library of Congress. And then because it was front page news throughout the country, it was covered by 150 plus reporters and photographers. There was just a huge amount of contemporary press coverage, much of which, God bless the nameless people who have scanned all those newspapers and put them online at newspapers.com and newspaperarchives.com. So all of that coverage I was able to access at home. And then I tracked down other various bits and pieces, wrote to different historical societies. The photo of those two gentlemen at the end came from the Hudson, Michigan Historical Society. And I had just gotten in touch because I had heard of their story, and lo and behold, they had this wonderful photo of the two of them. So.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
In appreciation of your visit to us today, we'll present you with the rotary wheel.
Thank you so much.
The four-way test on the back, and it's produced by the Village Network students. And if you have a few minutes, if there's any more questions afterwards, come on
Stick
up.
around for a few minutes,
and,
yep.
That would be great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just a reminder, next week is our special Armed Forces Recognition meeting in honor of Veterans Day next week. So we are going to try to get started a little bit early. So try to come about 10 minutes earlier than what you normally come. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.